Happy Friday. We have two report outs today. The first one is on a choosing by advantages for Moffett Capital Investments. This is sort of a completion plan item from the North Water Treatment sizing choosing by advantages. It sort of changed the course, and so we had to think through, what investments are we going to make in Moffett over a fairly long period of time. So a team got together. You'll hear about that in a minute. And then we also have a 30, 60, 90-day update. With that, I'll turn it over to Austin.
So I'm going to turn it right over to Jason. Jason is with us for 12 weeks. He kind of just started, so there's nothing like trial by fire. So everyone welcome Jason.
Thank you, Austin. So as mentioned, we had a group of experts come together at the Moffett Treatment Plant on Monday and Tuesday, and they discussed what would be the details of Moffett's role within the new configuration of what's going to feature the North Water Treatment Plant. So,
We'll invite the team on up.
yeah, come on up, team. And although it was brief, there was a lot of lively discussion and debate, which resulted in the best solution for Denver Water and its customers. So I'm going to turn it over to Jason for introductions.
Thank you. So the team that worked with us was Austin Steckler, Zach Alabassi, Damon McCurdy, Jason Hopkins, Jennifer Galimi, Jordan Soldano, Joel Zadedlik, Greg Fisher, Wes Eversole, myself, Jason Warwick, Pete McCormick, Ted Nicholas, and Nicole Ponsolette. So the reason for action was it was concluded that the North Water Treatment Plant would be at 75 capacity. And during the construction, Moffett needed to be able to do 120 MGD. And once the construction of North Water is complete, they needed to do 60 MGD for up to 20 years. So that's really what we looked at, is the different configurations that would get us 120 and 60 at the best price and the best value. Who's next?
So, as stated, our target state was we wanted to find a reliable and easy, relatively easy plant that can meet the 120 and 60 obligations to both partnerships and customers during construction of NTP and after NTP. Pete, you want to explain what CBA is?
CBA, this is the workflow. It shows what it is. Essentially, what the team did before the event was identify different alternatives that you would evaluate to get you the 60 and the 120. And they also had defined factors. So these are kind of the criteria that we use to grade the different alternatives. So all that was done prior to the event. And then once we were there, we defined what are must-haves versus things you just wanted for the criteria. So that kind of set the importance of it. And then a lot of discussion in the event to describe the attributes associated with the factor. So once you had the criteria and you looked at the alternative, you tried to decide what the advantage or the attribute was associated with that certain category or criteria. And that allows you to score them all. So once we did that, you can easily decide what the advantages are of each alternative, and then you really spend the rest of the time the group debates which one of those advantages is the most important. And then we will go through every single one of them in the matrix and weight them from 0 to 100 based on everybody's kind of personal or professional gut feel, and kind of debate and argue about which ones are the most important. Once all the scores are allocated, then we can tally up the total score for each alternative, graph that against the cost, and start to narrow down the decision making.
All right, so the work on the CBA started before we got together on Monday, when Zach and the plant staff got together, came up with a whole bunch of different potential solutions of what could be kept, what could be abandoned, what could be reused. And then they sent that information along to Nicole, and Nicole consolidated that into 8 different alternatives. I'm not going to go through all 8 of them, but they ranged from things like keeping everything in the plant, which was alternative 1, to keeping the east or west side of the plant, and east side was alternative 4, and west side was alternative 3. There were 2 alternatives that had a really kind of out of the box thinking, where we actually would move all of the disinfection from NTP down to Moffett and reuse the existing disinfection contact basins for disinfection for both NTP and Moffett. Would have allowed us to reduce some of the infrastructure up at NTP, but had a lot less reliability in the system. Didn't give us that 2-plant modularity that having 75 at NTP and 60 at Moffett allows. And defining an alternative, it's alternatives are the different options. So there are 2 or more people, things, or plans, one of which you choose as your solution. So after you identify your alternatives, then you have different factors, and those are kind of what are the things that are important, what are the things that you want to compare these, how do you want to compare these alternatives? So one of our big factors was total capacity. So it wasn't more is better. It was on target is better. We don't want to have to maintain more than what we need. Next factor was safety. We actually had safety in 2 different places because we had 2 big kind of categories of safety. We had, your typical fall hazards, confined space, electrical hazards, mechanical hazards, that kind of thing, which was related to how much equipment you had. And then we had whether we were going to keep chlorine gas or we were going to switch to sodium hypochlorite, which is a safer chemical alternative for chlorine. We had maintainability, which was measured on a difficulty scale, and obviously things that are easier to maintain are better. We already talked about the chlorine gas safety. We had salvageability, so that meant if we didn't use certain parts of the plant, we could salvage that equipment, use it in the part of the plant that was still being maintained. We had a permitting constructability, basically more new things that you were building, more new assets were going to have additional work that had to be completed. And then we had that reliability modularity. So single points of failure, you wanted fewer single points of failure. Then we, those criteria were basically our must-haves or our wants, and then the factors were just the what the advantages were for each factor.
So we got what is an attribute? It's a characteristic, quality, or consequence of one alternative. And then advantage, beneficial difference between the attributes of 2 alternatives. That's it.
So then after we went through and determined the advantages of each alternative, we had to go through and assign an importance to each advantage. And that's not the importance of each factor, it's just the difference between how all of the factors scored in the advantage category. So we decided that our most important advantage was alternative 1's advantage in reliability and modularity. And just as a reminder, that alternative was the one where we kept everything at Moffett operational. And then we scored that as 100, and then our next most important alternative we scored as a 90, and that was alternative 4's advantage in being the most on target with respect to capacity. So we scored that a 90, and then our next most important alternative was our advantage was also for alternative 4, and that was the advantage in safety, and we scored that as an 80.
So after all this work, this is really the picture that's worth 1,000 stickies. So all the work that we did up front and during the first 2 days of the CBA, basically this is the result of it. And what you're looking at is the 20-year life cycle cost versus the importance of each advantage. So you'll see things like option or alternative 1, that's keeping everything as is at Moffett. Has high cost, but really much less advantage compared to the others. So once we start to plot all of the work that we've done, based on importance and advantages and which alternative goes with what, you'll come out with a graph like this one, and you'll see as you go up the graph, you're basically gaining even cost, but you're also gaining quite a bit of advantage until we get to alternative 4, and that's when the line starts to flatten. And what that means basically is we're sinking a lot of cost, but not necessarily gaining a lot of advantage. So that's where our focus shifted, where we realized that A4 up to A6 and A5 were good alternatives. We just now became really more creating that hybrid that gets us the most advantage for hopefully not too much increase in cost. And what we've agreed on is alternative 4, but we also looked at the other alternatives and looked at what we can take from those, apply to alternative 4 without increasing the cost substantially, but gain more advantage. And we arrived with an alternative 4B, if you will. So we took a few bits and pieces from the other alternatives and applied them to alternative 4 and came up with an even better alternative, at a slightly higher cost, but we've gained even more advantage. So 4B, basically, that's the alternative that we're going to pursue, means that for Moffett to stay at 120, which is from today until NTP is commissioned and online, would require us to keep the entire disinfection process at Moffett operational. We would keep filter plants 2 and filter plant 3 and abandon filter plant 1. And by what I mean by abandon is not use it. We will determine what to do with it. We would also use all of the flocks and seds basins, east and west. There is 5 on this side and 6 on the west side. We would go to 1 rapid mixer instead of 2. When we go to 60, and that will happen when NTP is commissioned and online, we would continue to use the entire disinfection process, so both north and south disinfection contact basins. We would abandon filter plant 2 and rely on filter plant 3, and we would abandon the west side of the flocculation sedimentation and rely on the east side, the 5 basins, and still 1 rapid mix. There is also a backwash system that consists of a backwash tank and 3 pumps. We would continue to use the 3 pumps for the 120, but go down to 1 pump for the 60. So again, 2 phases, the 120 and then the 60 later on. We would also consider, I know Jennifer mentioned chlorine gas versus bleach. One of the options is to also, when Moffett transitions to the 60 million gallon capacity, at that point we'll look at, I guess, the logic of switching between chlorine gas to bleach and see if it makes sense at that point or not.
So what did we really learn? We learned how CBA works. A lot of people hadn't been involved in the CBA. Really confusing at first, going like, what are we doing here? It was really a struggle to start with. A lot of decision making. We had to close the doors a few times on our decisions and had a lot of votes and re-votes to figure out where we're going. It's much more complex than what everybody thinks it is to do a CBA. How did it come out? We had drain damage, okay? Accomplished it in 2 days. So the upfront work was really important to get this done in 2 days. We wouldn't have had the upfront work. We wouldn't have done this in 2 days. It was efficient. We used our time wisely. And the takeaway, CBAs are more complicated than what you think they are. And but through a cooperative effort, it's a lot better to do it as a group than as individuals. Questions?
Want to say thank you to the group. Great job. I want to reiterate how much work you guys are like the tip of the iceberg in your 2 days. But there's a giant amount of iceberg under there of work to get prepped and
so that we can really use the experts in the room there to debate and get to consensus, I think, on a good decision. And what you guys have done is incredible, because now we have a 20-year asset management plan basically for the facility, which everybody seems to be in aligned around, and that will make everything easier from a operations standpoint to a capital construction, all the projects that we need to do. So that it's just really good work, and appreciate all the effort. And I know the CBA is getting kind of thrown out there as a magic bullet around the organization. Let's use CBA. But Joel, I think you hit it on the head. It's a really complex process that takes a lot of work to get done up front. But when you do it, it's worth it, and it's much easier to have these good discussions to get everybody on the same page, and it's worth it. But if people are wondering about it, talk to one of these folks that have done it, because we've done a couple events now, and every time you almost have to do it to really understand what it is. And so huge resources in the organization for the folks that have done it. So thank you.
So our update is from Jeff Goley. Jeff also went through our 12-week program, and your graduation present after 12 weeks is you get to facilitate your own event, right? So Jeff facilitated and hosted a 6S event in the Tool Crib, and he's going to explain to you guys where they're at now.
Good morning, everyone. Happy May the 4th be with you. Bobby Guntharp helped us out. The aforementioned Jason Hopkins, Ryan Slayton, Steve Holder, Casey Strickland, of course, integral part of this, Marcus Dominguez and Joe Cleany. I want to bring Casey up because she's going to talk to a couple points as well. Our reason for action was the process for the Tool Crib was inefficient. There was no SOP or standard work. It required too much walking around to get tools, wasted movement, to complete the task of delivering a tool. So we took a look at this and we found what our 6S score was, which wasn't very good, but now if you look at it after the 30 days, we're at a 96%. And one reason is the RIE that we went through and all the hard work that we put in, but the second reason is you see the jump from the RIE to the 30-day at an 11% increase, and that's all Casey. Casey keeps this place clean, organized, and well running. So our completion plan, which is we have completed, we have our inventory list completed, we have a red tag area to send tools to that are either damaged, outdated, that we just don't use anymore. We've organized the housekeeping tools, and we've also created permanent aisle signage. Casey's going to talk about all of these things.
Okay, it pretty much comes down to, like Jeff said, the completed items, the inventory, the aisle assignments, and also the standard work is posted and it is followed. Let's see. We install brackets along the back west wall for safer storage. And we also, I've had to move the tool crib around a lot. It's a continuous thing every day, getting new tools and all that kind of stuff. Here's just a little stat. Since REI came to the crib, we've repaired 19 tools in-house at a total cost savings of about $3,600. And that's pretty big when it comes to, smaller tools, but we've been replacing them, but not many. We've mostly just been fixing them and hanging in there with it. So other than that, that's about all I got, but it came along really good.
There was another point on, sorry.
Which one?
There was just one more point. We also made extra room because there is growth. We do need more tools. We find getting more things to do. So Casey does a good job of organizing and making sure we have room to grow as well. Insights, Casey's the backbone, the heart and soul, the power plant, whatever you want to call it. She does this. She does this every day and she takes care of it. She keeps the tool crib immaculate. So we're going to start serving lunch in the trade shops on the floor of the tool crib. That's how clean it is. And Casey does a great job with continuous improvement because she finds just do it's every day and just takes care of them. So congratulations to Casey and thank you very much. It looks great, it flows, it's awesome. And Casey definitely dedicates herself to the tool crib with passion and excellence. Are there any questions? Yes, sir.
So what's the process for checking out a tool, and how long are you allowed to keep the tool in case it come after me back?
The question was, what's the process, and how long can you keep a tool, and will Casey come after you like a pit bull? And the answer is yes to the last question. So the process is you just go up to the tool crib, talk to Casey. We have a complete tool list. It's inventory list that has pictures of every tool. So if you don't even know what the tool is called, Casey can find it for you, tell you how it works, and give it to you. And you can keep it as long as you need it to complete your task. And then you just return it to Casey, and she gives you a high five and sends you on your way. Any other questions? There's a lot of those. Yes, ma'am.
What have you done for inventory control of the tools? Is an ID number on the tool or the barcode?
Let me do it. Casey, let me do it right here. The question was that how do we do inventory control? Is there a barcode or an inventory number? And I'll let Casey tell you all about it.
I mean, I just started with the system to where I just started in the zeros. And as I got to a tool, I'd write the serial number down, I take a picture, I record it on paper, and then I put it inside of a folder or a binder with them all in order in number sequence. So if I have to like pull a tool, I can go right to that page, pull it out, and just say it's no good. It's got to either be repaired. A lot of times you just throw it away because they're so far gone because we try to fix them in between. So it's just a series of pictures, pretty much. I can show you if you want. It's just binders and binders full of tools.
It's right here. Every tool has a number. Every tool's marked with a number, and it corresponds to the binders. Any other questions? Yes, Jason.
Are we going to have a standard for bringing in new tools, or is it going to be up to the shops to get what they need and then bring it in, or is it going to go through the personnel?
The question was, how do we requisition new tools, and how does that process work? Process is, if there's a need for a new tool, the shop will take that to Joe and Casey, and they will go to Rob to make the determination if the tool is necessary, cost analysis, and so on and so forth.
Can I add to that?
Please, Rob. Yes, you do. You're going to have to come up and stand with me. You want to hold hands or hug? Or?
God, no. So to add to that, we want to go shopping in our tool room first and our trucks first because we have such a huge amount that came into the tool room. It's just like you want to shop in your own house before you go to the grocery store, so we're going to do the same thing. And then we can find alternatives before we go spend money. And then we talk about it, do we really need this tool or should we rent it? How often do we use it? So there's a lot of items and examples of where we're going with this. It's a new process for us, but thank you both. It's tremendous the way it looks.
I think I saw another hand go up. No more questions? We got it? Thank you.
So I just want to end with, if I had it, what I call a Luddite Award, I would give it to Casey in a very good way in that we asked the question, how do we do inventory, and what does she say? I take a picture and I put it in a logbook. It's really simple, really easy. I don't have to log into a computer system. I don't have to do bar scanning. I just open my logbook and it's right there. And so it's very simple, very easy. And that's sort of the thing we want to kind of continue with thinking about. What's the simplest, easiest, least waste way to do things? And on that note, have a great weekend.